ready to go. So jump in. So we got tutors, SLP, Delafield, personalized Plum City, great. Um, just passed Wisconsin Fort, renew your license. Congratulations, Bonnie. You're in Madison, private tutor. Great. I got people who are jumping in, so I'm gonna admit everybody here. Shannon, it's always, she's probably just slowly getting in. Here we are. So Shannon, it's always a pleasure to have you on our calls. Thank you. So Athens from Lori, reading interventionist. Um, Meredith, you are, I got everything happening here. I'm adding people, I'm checking the chat. So Title One, great. From Athens, wonderful. So thanks for being here today. My name is Jeanne Schopf. I am currently serving as the president of the Reading League Wisconsin. I've been involved with the Reading League Reading League Wisconsin for about 5 years. Um, so here's the truth, friends. I was a teacher for 33 and a half years. Half of my career, I was a whole language teacher. I was, reading, writing workshop teacher and very involved with WSRA. And it wasn't until I became a third grade teacher and we started having conversations. Our school became a reading first school here in Door County. So I come to you from Door County. We started bringing dibbles into our school, and I actually got the book The Truth About Dibbles from Richard Allington because I pushed back on it, right? And so I remember my own daughter was identified at risk according to Dibbles in third grade. And I said, honestly, she just needs more time because that was my paradigm. I really thought that, she was a developing reader and she just needed more time. And underneath, I did not understand that fluency is the number one predictor of comprehension and generally is that light on your engine that says, engine check, something isn't right. And unfortunately, my district got that check engine light on my daughter's own dibbles, and they wanted to right away refer her to special education rather than really diving in to what did that reading fluency measure? What was it telling us about my own daughter? And rather than automatically, we're going to put her in special education, we didn't have the conversations about what is our next steps based on that Dibbles number. And nor did I understand as a teacher because I was not given the knowledge of the science of reading. I was not given the knowledge of the simple view of reading and what that fluency measure tells us about the reading brain. And then after that, I became a middle school reading interventionist, which is my love. Helping and serving those kids in the middle school that continue to struggle. So yes, I am here representing to the Reading League, but currently I am serving as a national literacy consultant. I work for myself in a variety of companies, traveling and working in schools across the country, helping them bring in their systems into place. And guess what, friends? One of them is bringing in an evidence-based, valid, reliable oral fluency measure because why? It is the check engine light. So, yes, like many of you, I'm going to share my screen now. So, like many of you, came into the science late and am learning and growing every single day about what I need to do to serve all children in order for them to learn to read. So here we are, slideshow, current slide. Okay, everybody see it? All right, so not only do I serve as a consultant nationally, I'm also a certified K-Peary dyslexia interventionist. So I currently serve four students. It's one of them in high school, one of them in fifth grade, sixth grader, and then two a fourth grader, and a second grader. So I serve in person and I serve virtually. So let's talk a little bit about what next steps in literacy instruction, connecting assessments for effective interventions. Just so everybody is aware, we're addressing these following chapters, 5, 6, and 7, and 8 on these dates. So make sure you mark them in your calendar. And I know if you've registered, you are certainly getting those reminders. So while I'm doing this, I'm also going to be keeping an eye on our participants. So people who are coming in, I'm admitting. Okay, so bear with me because I don't have a co-pilot today. Okay, so here we are. Just some good book discussion norms, which I think are always important. You know, coming prepared and reading the text, listen, ask questions, stay engaged, being present, connect ideas to practice, because this is what this is all about, right? We read this, what does it look like in the classroom? And then stay focused on the text and the purpose, and let's just stay grounded in how we can grow today in this text. So, what are our intentions today? To understand what reading fluency is. Okay. And I did not understand it when I was teaching third grade and I got my students dibble scores. I didn't know what that meant other than some kids are reading and some kids need special education. To learn how to use the oral reading fluency decision tree to guide instruction. I love this decision tree. I initially learned about it when I was going through the Reading Teacher's Top 10 Tools professional development program developed by Dr. Deb Glazer, and she's the co-author in this book. And I oftentimes, when I go into schools around the country, I bring in this decision tree because I think it just brings clarity to that what that fluency measure is teaching us. Okay. To learn evidence-based instructional practices to improve fluency. And then finally, to understand oral reading fluency norms, okay, to guide our progress, okay? So let's get this started. I'm going to quick check the chat, make sure I have everybody. So we have Anna Go, wonderful administrator from Ohio Reading SOAR Facebook page. Thank you for being here, Bobby. Melanie, question from Jill. The student who progresses well with new phonics concepts but struggles to get fluency or scores up to grade level. Love this book, has provided great idea. Okay, so Jill, put into the chat, very important, what is the grade level of this student? Okay, so drop that in, Jill, so I can help you. We can answer that question together. So we have Karen from St. Paul, Minnesota. Thank you to be here. Great things happening in Minnesota. I had the chance to work in South Washington School District, teaching the science of reading to a group of music teachers in high school, middle school. It was totally fun. Um, so what else do we have? Racine, Chrissy, thank you. Okay, incoming fourth grader, thanks. So Jill, I can tell you this question right now. So it's pretty clear. You can dive into Jack Fletcher. He's the researcher. He's done quite a bit of work in the space of reading instruction and the reading brain. And really, honestly, if we look at those reading norms, it's very if this child is truly dyslexic, right, it is very hard to move rate beyond second grade. And it really is because of the neuroplasticity in the reading brain. And we're beyond that sweet spot. So for some kids, right, their rate is always going to be a bit behind. And that's where we have to dive in further deeply to see if the student truly a dyslexia student. Because if they have a typical reading brain and they're getting really good, solid instruction to the right intensity, to the right amount of time, their fluency should progress. And we'll go through the decision tree. Unless that child has a neurotypical brain, a diverse reading brain, like my own daughter, she's always going to have a lower rate. Okay. So we'll keep talking about that as we go. All right. So I got everybody in the chat. I think I got all the participants coming. I don't think I have anybody jumping in late that need to be admitted. So let's get started. Okay. All right. So here we go. Oh, here we are. So let's start out with this on page 131. I found this quote to be pretty profound that what is reading fluency? So reading through each line, it helps us understand that, not but rate is important. Accuracy in word reading is critical. The flow and prosody of our voices reflect an understanding of meaningful phrases and syntax. And ultimately, comprehension is an outcome of reading fluency. Okay? So we have to remember that it is an outcome. Okay? Of comprehension. So, what does that mean exactly? That means we must, as Jan Hasbrook has taught us over and over again, accuracy first and foremost, right? We must have accurate readers. We must then, if we have accurate readers, we're going to have that rate. And we have to be very, very, very careful with rate because of our bringing in our progress monitoring and wanting to get kids to grade level rate, we unconsciously teach kids that reading faster is better. And we have to tell them we don't want them to read fast. We want them to read well. Okay, so we don't teach them that reading fast because I get those kids in the upper grades who've been taught to read fast and then they just read fast to read fast. Okay, and then finally, that's that prosody, right? So if we know we're reading accurately and we're reading with understanding of what the text is saying, therefore we're going to have natural prosodic reading because we're naturally extracting and constructing meaning as we go, and that comes through with prosody because we know what's happening in the story, which is the result of what? Reading comprehension. Okay, so how do we measure reading fluency? Okay. A broad research base spanning multiple decades supports measuring reading rate and accuracy of oral reading fluency through a curriculum-based measure to determine. And Stephanie Stoller teaches us too, right? ORF answers questions. Which students might be at risk for future reading difficulties? And friends, that's the question we have to ask when we're getting our kindergarten mid-year benchmark, our first grade early and beginning of the year BOY, your middle of the year. It's really that medical model, that high blood pressure, that check engine light, which kids are at risk. Okay. And so when my daughter was in third grade and her DIBEL score, her fluency score was quite low, we should have been asking ourselves, why is she at risk for a reading difficulty? She's at risk for a reading difficulty. She can't comprehend if she can't read words. So what are we going to do differently rather than let's put her into special education? Which students are not making sufficient progress to meet end of the year goals? These are the questions we have to ask, right? Because our ORF measure really does tell us how well our systems are working. It is a system check. What do I mean by systems? Is the student getting the right instruction to the right amount of time, to the right intensity, with the right instructor? So our kids that are the furthest behind need the most experienced, highly trained, structured literacy teacher in the building. And so if they're not making progress, why? Okay. Which students may need additional diagnostic assessment? That's on page 131. And that's the question we should have been asking in that student consultation team meeting when I was the parent, the teacher at the same time when my own daughter was behind in her reading rate and accuracy. Which diagnostic assessments? Okay, so here we are, universal screening, benchmark, and progress monitoring for reading fluency. So when we talk about which assessments to use, what is the advice? Well, we need to make sure that we have a curriculum-based measure. Now, in Wisconsin, we have something called our legislation is called Act 20, and many states, because I know I have people here from outside of Wisconsin, many states have a recommendation or a requirement for early reading screening. In Wisconsin, it's Ames Web Plus. And so many schools are using that a tool. Now, some schools are actually using Acadians and Fastbridge, and then of course we have Dibbles. But any one of those are going to give us a valid, reliable screening measure. Now, in the textbook, and we do know we have this as our reality, many schools are using a computer adaptive assessment, a CAT, such as iStation, iReady, STAR. And I don't know why the authors name Fastbridge, because Fastbridge is not a CAT ORF measure. It is a pencil paper or teacher to student, eyeball to eyeball measure. Now, one thing, I just did a presentation with my company that I work with about these assessment tools. We really have to know the sensitivity and specificity of these assessments. So we want a sensitivity of 0.90, which means if we have 100 students, 90 of them are going to be correctly identified for at risk, and 10 will have been missed by the screener. And I know with Fastbridge, because I just did this presentation, the sensitivity in first grade is 0.72. So it's really low for catching those kids that we have to find when we need to find it. So if you are using Fastbridge in your district, know that you are going to have to increase your cut scores to probably 40th percentile and below with your diagnostic measures. Acadians has stronger sensitivity and specificity. You could get away with a lower cut score and you're not going to miss students. Dibbles has a higher sensitivity, and I think Ames Web Plus, that's why Wisconsin picked it because of its sensitivity and specificity. Now, if you were using a CAT, I can tell you right now, those CAT screeners are not going to have the sensitivity of 0.90. They're lucky to probably have 0.60. So, which means you're going to have a higher cut score, which with your phonics, your diagnostic assessments going on. Now, you can
I-
use an informal survey.
Jeannie,
Bunny, I'm going to wait
can
for
I,
questions until the end, okay? So hold that on or put it in chat, okay? We're just going to go through and we'll come back. So, your informal survey, which the text recommends you can use, is the Core Phonics core survey. Okay. Now, I wouldn't recommend that just because it's not real valid and reliable. And the good thing is, friends, you can get Acadians and Dibbles free. So even when I work in districts who have no money, I recommend using those two and using the free version. Okay. All right. So here we are. According to the text, page 132, it is recommended that teachers confirm computer-based or adaptive fluency assessment scores with individual CBMs to validate the students' reading fluency, especially those students that score below benchmark. Why, friends? Because of because of its inadequacy with sensitivity and specificity, not getting to that 0.90 or 0.80, okay, which measures true false positives and true false negatives. So that's why we want to follow that up. So Bonnie, did you have something in the chat? You can put it in the chat and I will check that, okay, as we progress. Okay, so here we go. I don't know why this is so low. So what does research say about improving fluency? To become fluent readers, students must reach a level of automaticity with the mechanics of reading. So, phonemic awareness, decoding, word recognition, and assessing for word meaning. Fluent reading is a strong predictor of reading comprehension. Matter of fact, it is the #1 predictor of reading comprehension. So if we ground ourselves in the simple view of reading, right? So here we have reading comprehension. Remember, fluency is an outcome, right? It's decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. So what do we need to have automaticity, right? We need automaticity in phonemic awareness. We need automaticity in our phonics patterns. Right here, what do we see here, friends? Fluency. We have to have fluency. Then we need to have fluency in language comprehension understanding the vocabulary and the text comprehension. So when my daughter in third grade scored at risk for reading difficulties on her Dibbles measure, the question we should have had was why and what are we going to do? What are we going to do to dial down? Rather than let's just put her in special education. Okay? So let's keep rolling here. And on page, this is in your textbook, Jan Hasbrook and her colleague Tyndall have done the work really on fluency measures. And this goes to your question, Jill, about your fourth grader. Let's look. Okay. So here's what Jan is teaching us, and these are the 2017 norms. Okay, so here we are, percentile rank fourth grade. And I'm sorry, this is a little wavy, but I took a picture and I inputted it on my thing. So here's fourth grade. And what we want to have students between the range of 75 and the 50th percentile in fourth grade. So if we look across here, we can see fall words correct per minute. We are looking for about anywhere between 125 words per minute to 94. Then in the winter, right, we're looking at 143 to 120. So if you look here, the range 94 is the low end of the range. Look at what the low end of the range is in winter with our fourth grader. It's 95. So really, between our instruction, our hope for our growth, right, would be about 25 words growth between words read per minute on the low end from the fall to the winter. Now we look at the end of the year, our low end, our fifth percentile. It's really hard to read when we're wavy, so let's take a look at this chart in our text. Okay, friends? And I don't have it marked, so I'm just paging through the text to see where it is. So if you happen to have it marked, that would be great. I should have had it marked, but I don't. I think it's at the end. All right. My apologies. Okay, here we are. It's on page 168. So we look at the end of the year, fourth grade, we want to get to 133. So to your question, Jill, we have a fourth grader reading words automatically, but not growing words read. So now we have to ask that question, right? Is the child getting the right instruction to the right amount of time? And we're going to answer that question as we move through to that fluency grid, which is the next slip. So you notice, everyone, if we examine this words per minute, you can see that by the time kids get to sixth grade, actually, if you look at fifth grade, what is, everybody, the bottom range for a fifth grader in spring words read per minute? Everybody got it? Put it in the chat. We're going to do a waterfall. What is the number? I'm going to check chat. Don't hit enter until I say hit. What is the bottom range for a fourth grader? Go, put it in. So we're looking at 50th percentile. I know I said bottom range. I meant bottom range of benchmark. I should have said 50th percentile. But so 50th percentile, my bad, would be 146. You see that? And I meant bottom range of, what I meant was, it wasn't clear, my apologies. Bottom range of proficiency would be 146. Okay? Now look at sixth grade. What is the bottom range of the 50th percentile? Ready? Waterfall. Drop it in. Go. What? We have 146 in sixth grade and 146 in fifth grade. It didn't change. Why is that? Well, Jeanne Hasbrook has taught us this. Basically, our brains process language at the rate in which we speak, which is around the 150 words read per minute. So this is where fast isn't great. Okay. So if we look at sixth grade, 50th percentile, it's at 146. Sixth grade, winter benchmark, 145. It grew one word. Okay, one word in the spring. Okay, and I'm sorry, I'm not real clear. I'm probably just going too fast. So I just want us to really be grounded in understanding this ORF measure, right? So if we look at sixth grade, 50th percentile, it's not all that different than fifth grade, 50th percentile. Winter benchmark, 166 to 145. Fifth grade, 160 to 133, right? If we look at spring words correct per minute, fifth grade, 146, 50th percentile, 169, 75th percentile. It's almost the same in fifth grade to sixth grade. It doesn't change much. Why? Because that's the sweet spot of comprehension. If we read in that range, we are going to have, with accuracy, we are going to have enough cognitive memory, right? I should say some working memory to get to that outcome of reading comprehension. All right? Anybody have any big ahas? You can drop it in the chat. Okay, so Bonnie, I'm reading your your I appreciate your version. The cat starts. See, oral reading fluency is not something that you can read aloud to children. They have to be able to read it themselves. And so this is a situation where, as a dyslexia interventionist, I would never have an oral reading fluency measure read to the students because we are measuring their automaticity in decoding. So the only time we are going to read aloud as an accommodation in a STAR is when it's the STAR universal assessment. The universal assessment, not their ORF measure that is used to measure word reading efficiency. Does that make sense? So there's a couple different tests there. Okay, so Chrissy says text complexity plays a role in differences of measuring. Okay, so Chrissy, very good point. So this is what I know for sure, because I just did a presentation on this. FastBridge has highly decodable passages related to the phonics patterns. So therefore, students will have a higher reading rate in FastBridge compared to Acadience because Acadience is more directly aligned to grade level authentic text. So I did this. I had kids in first grade and second grade, and I would do a FastBridge or ORF on them 1 week. The next week I would do Acadience. Acadians, they always had a lower rate because they had more text complexity. To per your question, Chrissy, yes, if you are using FastBridge as your ORF measure, it's not going to translate real well into how the rate children are reading in sixth grade text because it's not equivalent to the text complexity. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does.
Okay, so Acadians will though, it'll have a strong correlation. So Jill, so a student with low working memory or poor rapid automatic naming may always struggle to meet ORF measures. Okay, so working memory cannot be improved. It only can improve through automaticity of word reading. Therefore, it frees up. So rapid automatic naming, the RAND measure, just tells us a student who has really strong retrieval, right? Which is what? A phonological process. And so for students who have a low RAND measure, that's a red flag to me to identify this kid probably has an atypical reading brain, which means we need deeper diagnostic assessments, probably a CTOP or a tower. Lori, is it true with Ames Web? I didn't do a presentation on Ames, so I'd have to probably dive into that. And you could do that yourself. Just asking that question really out there on you can say what is the sense what is the relationship between the reading rate in Ames Web compared to Acadians, and it'll probably tell you. Um, Yes, the oral reading fluency request, Bonnie, for me to read to a student was odd. Yeah, I would not recommend that. That you have to you can't read that out loud. We have to measure. So what you want to go back to them with, whatever district you're working with, is they need to do the grade level ORF, and then they need to keep going lower and lower and lower until they get to that proficient benchmark. So if you have a fourth grader, you would give that fourth grade ORF measure, and then you'd tell them to do third grade, do so what I did is I have a ninth grader that I assessed her at ninth grade, and then I kept going lower until I got to fourth grade. So that's kind of what you want to be able to do. I was walking, schools are under the pressure of scores with an Act 20. That's only up to third grade, right? And so our third graders, you got to keep telling them they got to dial down. Let's go here. So Christina, there's a copy of a recording of the presentation you did on Fastbridge. It's on my YouTube channel. So I will because that's public. You could listen to it. So there's a huge difference between it. And I will find my YouTube channel and I'll put it in the chat. Okay. I think we're getting through that. So I had a question from Gretchen. If 150 words per minute is a sweet spot, is there value in trying to increase them from 50 to 7th percentile reading faster? I basically depends on the kid, depends on the grade level. If they get enough reading practice, they will naturally improve their rate. So it just really depends upon what we know about that student, right? And what their goals are. So it depends. So let's go ahead and further. Yes, it is found that similarity to Ames Web text complexity. Like I don't know that. So that's a question we have to dial in. So it's just good information to know. So the big question we have to know is what's the sensitivity and specificity of Ames Web? So that tells us our cut scores. How far do we have to go to dial in? And the second question is what is the relationship between rate and Acadians or Ames Web compared to Acadians? And we should be able to get that by just a quick search in social media. Okay, so this is what tells us what to do. And I love this. I love this fluency grid, right? So what do we need to do with kids according to the decision tree? So let's take a look at that. Now that we've really grounded ourselves in those measures. All right, so 135. So we have, here's our decision tree, established benchmark rate. And as and we want it depending upon the grade level, right? So if our kids have a reading rate, we want to get those kindergarten and first graders to the higher level of advanced, a higher level of proficiency in ORF measure, because that is their future as far as reading comprehension. We have to know that third grade and below, it's harder to push those kids, but it's going to depend on what we know about the student. So let's break this down. So what does the text tell us? If the score is at or above benchmark, that at or above benchmark, with an accuracy of 95% or higher, we need to celebrate and just go ahead with what we're doing in our classroom. So, which means if we have a fourth grader who comes into us in the fall and they're at or above benchmark, that means they're at 125 words read per minute with a 95% accuracy, we just celebrate and keep rolling. Okay. If the score is near benchmark, slightly below or slightly above, we want to do teacher directed reading and rereading practice. So that's what I'm going with the decision tree here, right? So it basically says core reading program, extensions, frequent independent reading with appropriate text. If the score is at benchmark with accuracy less than 95%, what do? Now, according to Susan and Deb, we want to listen to the student read and ask ourselves, are the results because the student read too fast, too slow? Okay. Does the student have difficulty with decoding as we listen to them? We might want to administer a phonics survey from chapter 4. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? You can drop it in the chat. If students have accuracy at or above 95 or accuracy below 95, but they have, this is the question you had, Jill, in fourth grade, right? No, yours was below benchmark. I'll just check the chat here to see if anybody has any questions. Oh, Marlene, you found me. That's awesome. Thank you. All right, nobody have any questions? I mean, we really want to celebrate those kids because honestly, right, we have so many kids that are below benchmark that all our energy is going there to in all reality, right? Okay, so here we are. Um, if the score is below benchmark, is the student slow with 95% or with accuracy, right? This is where we want to make sure that rate is the focus of instruction. We want to give them fluency practice, timed readings, repeated readings, may also require a phonics diagnostic. So a lot of those kids, all right, that they have 95% accuracy, that's where we're going to focus. And if we look at, I don't know about you guys, but I love these activities that they recommended on page 158 to use with those students. There's a lot of research around repeated readings. For the older kids, I still use repeated readings, but if we're grades fourth and above, we want to give them repeated readings with greater intention and practice for multiple purposes, right? And so it could be to summarize, it could be to answer questions, but each reading should have a different purpose. Repeated reading with recorded materials, simultaneous oral reading, take turns oral reading, echo reading, paired whisper reading, and paired reading. So for those kids that are below benchmark, but they're accurate readers. So this is Jill, your student, right? Who is below benchmark and is accurate. And notice it says here may also require a phonics diagnostic. So you might have to dial in a little bit more with that student. And then because the student is in fourth grade, just know how much rate will improve over time. And then make sure kids are getting this opportunity for repeated reading in their interventions. And this can be done in your core instruction, friends, right? So our core instruction can give kids opportunities to read the passage multiple times. We just have to coach our teachers into giving kids multiple opportunities to read the same text and use those strategies. So does that help, Jill? I'm just gonna, oopsie, I don't know what I did there. Okay, I was just gonna go to chat. I'm just checking chat. Perfect, thank you. Okay, good. All right. And again, I'm honestly, as a classroom teacher, if I have kids that are accurate and behind, if I just give them a couple opportunities of repeated readings, and friends, send those home for parents to be reading, right? Parents want to be working with their kids, right? That's a simple little thing parents can do with their students and give them multiple opportunities to read a grade level passage. Now, if you're struggling with what to send home, I'm going to recommend a couple places. So some of you might have heard of, ReadWorks, right? Those are great passages to send home, but there's another great one out there. Have you heard of Text Project? Text Project has grade level passages that are research based on helping kids have multiple exposures to the 4,500 morphological word families. And so I would dial into the Text Project and I would send a lot of that home and ask the parent to do multiple readings with a little grid. And the passages give you repeated readings with a student name on page 159. That's something you could send home for parents to do that are going to really help children improve their rate. So I'm going to go here. Jill, helpful, thank you. It's challenging when I see a student. Oh, that's the problem, twice a week, right? Um, yeah, this is what I would try to do for them at home. And it doesn't always happen, right? But that's all we can do, right? Is just say, please support your child. And I would have a conversation. Even in middle school, when I was interventionist, I was calling parents. And we just have to call parents and say, hey, I'm sending this home. This is where your kid is at. She needs to practice. And we just have to really step up in that. So, Geraldine, I'm also wondering what skills that have automaticity in, like how fast that they blend and say, okay, then we're going to dial in now. These are for just for the kids who have 95% accuracy. Okay, let's dial in. Text Project. Thank you, Amy, for putting in because I don't have a co-pilot. Will this recording be shared? Yes, it's going to be in the Reading League Wisconsin. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead, friends. What about kids if the score is below benchmark and below 95% accuracy? According to this benchmark rate, right? It says teach decoding of high frequency words, teach heart words, read connected text to practice. Those are those decodable passages, right? That have those high frequency words. Spell high frequency words in sentences. Now, this is where we get into that nuance. We don't want kids memorizing words on flashcards, right? And so we have to make sure that we are teaching new words. Now, friends, and I have some friends out there that are dropping this in the chat because I don't have a co-pilot today. Can you search the new science of teaching high frequency words? And I put it in the chat initially, and I think I can put it in the chat now. I think I can download it. Let me download it in here because it doesn't address this. Oh, I'm going to put it in the chat. Oh, friends, I love this. This was written by Linda Farrell and Michael Hunter. It's called the New Model for Teaching High Frequency Words. And basically, they dial in to basically how to teach some of these words with other patterns and how that these are words that we have to teach, systematically and effectively. And there's only 38 of them. Thank you, Bonnie. That's exactly. But I put in the PDF that Linda and Michael wrote. Now, friends, reach out to me because what I did is I took this document and I created a teacher-friendly document. I use it all the time with my kids that I tutor. I just assess, do they know these high frequency words? And then I teach those systematically and explicitly. There's not many of them, 38. And then I use the flash words. So once I teach the pattern, then we read these words as flash words. We've already read them and spelled them, and then we go ahead and we practice them. And it can be very easily done in classrooms. So reach out to me. And as far as how to find me, the Reading League, my Reading League email, let me put it in there. Let's see, Jeannie. No, I think Jeannie at Wisconsin. Oh, I don't. I'm going to put you my personal email because I don't even remember my Reading League email fast enough. Oopsie.com. Okay, not welcome. Okay, if you reach out to me, I will send you that flash word. Okay, all right. So basically, this is what the text tells us here, and I'm looking at time. We have 15 minutes. Rainbow writing, salt box, wiki stick, speed drill. Now, this is what I do with my kids that I tutor, And I use this in the classroom when I worked as an interventionist. I would use that speed drill activity where it's the grid, and I would take the flash words that Linda and Michael put together, and I would put them in there, and we do flash word practice. So a little girl that I work with right now, we do always read our flash words before we get into our sentences and our passages. So she has automaticity in those high frequency words. I love this drill. I would highly recommend that one. Okay. All right. So now, if the student score is below benchmark and below 95, assess phonics. So consider performance on the nonsense word fluency, NWF, administer the phonics survey from chapter 4. Friends, I looked at this survey. I love it. And for upper grades, like I'm doing some consulting work for students for upper grades, I'm going to recommend this one. This is the only one that I have seen that actually has multiple nonsense words and all those different syllable types. I personally think this is the best one on the market, so I would use that. How many do you recommend teaching per week? 3 to 4 more. So basically, Christina, what I do if I'm working with a first grader, which I have, once I teach the CVCs, then I take those CVC flash words and I put them on the grid. Once I teach CVCs, the blends, I teach them in my content area, then I put them on the grid. You know, some of those words we got to teach in kindergarten so they can read decodable passages like the and a and you know, some of those that are highly come up quite often in those first decodable passages. But then what happens is I just move them along, but I do use rather than a Dolch list, rather than the Fry list, I use Linda's list, and it's been very successful for the kids that I have worked with. Okay. All right. So if the score is below benchmark and below, instructional practices, word chains, friends, we got to be doing word chaining. And whether your curriculum has it or not, this is what I have found to be the greatest lever of change with all the kids that I've worked with, kindergarten through grade 9, is word chaining every day. And try to get that in. And even if you see kids twice a week for 20 minutes, do a word chain. Because as Amy spoke to, that brings that sound to print, sound to print. Blend as you read, word sorts, sound spelling boxes, syllable mapping for upper grades. This is the stuff that we have to be doing in our phonics instruction, okay? Yeah, thank you, Bonnie. I appreciate that because I did say calm because I put it in there. Do you recommend a word chain research? They have one in here. If anybody wants to drop in the chat, which page? Would Linda's words be similar? No, Linda's is better because it narrows down not 75 words that you really have to teach. Okay. That's why I want to get that to you. So if you go to the fluency practices, they have on page, actually, I came from this, the fluency. I think it's in the phonics section. Oh, page 125. Thanks, Amy. Mark it. UFly has word chains connected to top. Yes. The only problem with UFly is they don't give you the teacher language. And I've been in a lot of classrooms and I've seen a lot of not good word chains because we want to have what sound do here, what sound changes, what letter changes, what sound changes, what letter changes. And because UFly doesn't have that script in those lessons, teachers oftentimes don't know what to do and they don't really know. So I would recommend using the language that they use on 125 because that really is what sound changes, what letter changes. Okay. All right, I do want to give time for questions. If the score is below benchmark and below 95%, we do have to dial in. So Jill, per your question, is that fourth grader, can that fourth grader manipulate sounds? And so my ninth grader, what I did is I did the past assessment from Kilpatrick. She couldn't do any advanced manipulation. And so what that tells me is I have to do sound chaining and word and sound chaining and letter chaining every day with her. because I have to get her reading brain attuned to the sounds what sounds she hears, and segment those sounds, know what sound changes, and manipulate it. And that's the work that I do with kids in upper grades. And so that's what we have to find out about your fourth grader is we have to dial into that. Okay. I'm going to check. UFly has a word change script on page 32, 34, front of the manual. Thank you, Meredith. And you know what? I appreciate you putting that in. But a lot of teachers, right? We're so busy. We just grab the lesson, right? So unless we have really grounded training in the science of reading and phonics, we're just grabbing that lesson because I've seen it happen. I'm grateful that it's in there. Amy, thank you. Reading Simplified, switch it. It's what I use with my upper kids. Switch it is fantastic, and Marnie is great. Meredith, I made my teachers fill in the blank document until they got used to it. Way to go, Meredith. Do you want, I don't know, if you want to share that, pass that around to everybody because, we all got to lean into each other. Thank you, Amy. All right, so let's go ahead. Phonemic awareness activities. Again, head, waist, and toes. I really recommend that because I had a school that was using 95% phonics and they were doing finger stretch in kindergarten. And I said, let's just get these kids standing up and go head, waist, toes, get them out of their seats. And then you can see, can they blend and segment? And one thing that I love about UFly, it takes our kindergarten right to the phoneme level immediately. We're not wasting any time with compound words because that's where we need our kids to go. If I did intervention in kindergarten, which I did, I would immediately do Alconin boxes with my kindergartners and get them to drop the sounds and manipulate the sounds. I had a kindergartner, okay, who on Dibbles showed me she was at risk for reading last summer. I tutored here all year, once a week, 60 minutes. And she got some phonics from 95 in the classroom. This summer, I just tested her again with Dibbles. She's all at benchmark and everything. It's amazing. She just needed a lot of that explicit instruction in manipulating sounds and doing sound boxes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and check the box. These are free, lots of lists, but again, plan a script, stick to it. Good job, Amy. Do you like Kilpatrick drills or do you think visual? There's a lot of there's a lot of chatter about Kilpatrick's work and we don't need to manipulate sounds, but I have found with my students, when they can segment and manipulate those sounds and I bring it immediately into a word chaining, it helps them tune into the sound and then tune into the letters. For my advanced kids, I have found Kilpatrick's 1 minute drills doesn't take much time. It warms up their reading brain. They start thinking about sounds, but I immediately go into a word chain or I use switch it with them. So yes, I would use them, but we have to get the letters going. Holly Lane has one out. Head, waist, and toes. Kids responded well. Great. Okay, let's keep rolling here because I want to give some time for questions. All right. So there is strong empirical evidence that students need to read at a minimum of the 50th percentile to support comprehension. There is also evidence that the 75th percentile may frustrate students and teachers, giving them an inaccurate impression that reading faster will result in better reading. Teachers should strive for the 50th to 75th. That sweet spot, friends, right in between there. Okay. So here are the questions we need to ask ourselves. What does fluent reading look and sound like in your classroom? Which strategies have you found most effective for supporting fluency? How do you balance fluency with important comprehension? How do you help students understand why fluency matters? And how do you currently assess fluency and refine your approach? So I'm going to stop sharing here because I don't know what happened with my slide deck. We have 5 minutes. So if you have a question and you want to unmic, that would be great. I'm just going to say everybody gets, 1 minute to quick share. So go ahead if anybody wants to unmic and share. Ask a question. I went through a lot. There were a lot of questions. Whitney, the beautiful thing is the Reading League Wisconsin, we don't have membership. So all you have to do is find us on our website, the Reading League Wisconsin, and register for our newsletter. You'll get all the up to dates of what's happening in Wisconsin there. We have a Facebook page that you can see up to date information, and our YouTube channel has our virtual series. So the Reading League Wisconsin was the first Reading League chapter in the country. So we have oodles of great stuff on our YouTube channel and our book studies. All right. I'm curious about the speed drills. All I do, Marlene, is I think they have it in here. So all I do is get that grid that they have in here. And anybody you can find it before I can. This grid, the grid on page 164. Okay, the grid on 164. I use Linda and Michael's flash word list because those are the ones based on their research comes up most frequently. And then what I do is the initial words in kindergarten, I teach immediately that are those flash words. We read them, I teach the spelling of them using the heart word technique, right? So they know how to recognize those sounds rather than memorizing them. And then I start putting them on the drill. Now, I repeat the words if I don't have enough to fill the whole grid. So if I'm just working on the, had, just the simple CVCs, I just repeat them. I know, Bob, isn't that great? The new model. I don't know why Linda and that is not talked about more in the source space because I just think it's brilliance, and I just think if we just integrate that into our work, what a difference it would make. So I'm going to put my email in there again because we all hate to recreate the wheel. This is my personal email. And for those of you who are out in other states, okay, like I said, I represent. You can find my website. I think I have it posted on my website. Pathways Towards Literacy is, oh, I spelled it wrong. I typed it wrong. My typing is terrible. There you go. You can find me there. Okay, anybody want to, I might ask any questions? Thank you, Bobby, for putting that in there. What I did is I took that and I put it in a teacher-friendly document. So that's what I would give to you. How does recitations expand beyond repeating reading exercises? Many schools are going towards classical trivium approaches. I'm not sure what the classical trivium approaches are necessarily, but I'm just going to go back to what the research says, right? Research has been really, really clear that repeated readings for kids who have 95% accuracy are going to improve rate. And so we have to give kids multiple opportunities to read things more than once. And it can be in our universal, it can be our universal curriculum. Okay. Also, I'm going to put it back in there again. Don't forget text project. This, Elfrida Hebert, she just did a really good talk on Melissa and Lori Love Literacy on her text project and using text and how you should use them. So if you listen to that podcast, I would listen to that. So, okay, friends, this has been recorded. It will be uploaded in our Reading League Wisconsin YouTube channel. And again, you have my email. Reach out every time. Find me on my website. And I definitely am here to support you. Are you suggesting repeated reading need to be 95? Well, I'm looking at what I'm going by what they're saying on their chart, right? Because it says below benchmark rate. accuracy at or above 95. So if their rate is words read per minute rate is not at benchmark at that 50th percentile, but they can read accurately, we want to give them repeated readings. This little grid is going to be what you just bring with you to every conversation you have with every teacher. This grid, unless your school has a decision matrix of if then that, which most schools don't, I would use this. Is this podcast with Freddie? Yes, it's excellent, Amy. All right, friends. This has been a wonderful morning. I'm here in Wisconsin and it's cloudy, but I'm going to head to a farmer's market for a couple hours and enjoy my Saturday. So thank you, all of you, for being here today. I know our next Saturday talk is going to be fantastic. So I look forward to listening to it or maybe being there in person if I can. All right, everyone, have a great day. I'm going to stop recording and here we are. Stop recording.